They say that when you get to be my age, your mind starts playing tricks on you, that your memories blur, that you can't trust what you see anymore. My own son has been suggesting for months now that maybe I need extra help, that maybe I'm not as sharp as I used to be, that perhaps it's time to think about alternative living arrangements. But let me tell you something about being 73 years old. You don't survive 7 decades on this earth without learning to read people, without developing instincts that younger folks haven't earned yet, without seeing patterns that others miss because they're too busy staring at their phones. My name is Margaret Ellen Crawford, and I've been called a lot of things in my life. Stubborn, overbearing, old-fashioned, but never, ever stupid. And what happened on that Tuesday morning in October would prove that the sharpest weapon in any arsenal isn't youth or strength, it's experience. The day started like any other. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, just like I have every single day for the past 50 years. My late husband Gerald used to joke that I didn't need an alarm clock because my body was wound tighter than a Swiss watch. He'd been gone for 8 years now, but I still woke up expecting to feel him next to me, still reached over to his side of the bed before remembering it would be cold and empty. I shuffled into my slippers, the fuzzy pink ones that my grandson Aidan had picked out for my birthday, and made my way downstairs. The house was quiet in that particular way that only early mornings can be. No traffic sounds yet, no birdsong, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the tick-tick-tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Aidan was staying with me this week. His parents, my son Marcus and his wife Jennifer, had their marriage counselling sessions on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and they'd asked if I could keep him overnight on Mondays and Wednesdays, so they wouldn't have to rush him to school in the morning. Of course I'd said yes. I'd say yes to any extra time with my grandson. At 7 years old, he was the light of my life, the reason I got up in the morning, the reason I bothered to keep this big old house instead of downsizing like everyone kept suggesting. I started breakfast, pancakes, because Aidan loved pancakes, not the frozen kind from a box, real pancakes, made from scratch with buttermilk and a secret ingredient, a tiny bit of vanilla extract, that my own grandmother had taught me. I mixed the batter slowly, watching it come together, finding comfort in the familiar motion. This was something I knew I could trust. This was something that couldn't gaslight me or make me question my reality. By 6:30, I heard the thump, thump, thump of small feet on the stairs. Aidan appeared in the doorway, his brown hair sticking up in every direction, his Captain America pajamas wrinkled from sleep. He was clutching his stuffed bear, Mr. Snuggles, a worn brown teddy bear with one eye slightly loose and a patch on his left foot where I'd sewn him back together last year. "Morning, Grandma," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, sunshine," I said, flipping a pancake. "Did you sleep well?" He nodded and climbed onto the stool at the kitchen counter, setting Mr. Snuggles next to him. "I had a dream that we went to the zoo and the penguins could talk." "What did they say?" I asked, smiling. "They said they wanted ice cream," he said seriously. "But I told them they already live on ice, so they should be happy." I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from deep in my belly. "That's very logical of you." We ate breakfast together, and I cherished every moment. The way he got syrup on his cheek, the way he swung his legs under the stool, because they didn't quite reach the footrest, the way he told me rambling stories about his friend Jackson from school, who could supposedly burp the entire alphabet. After breakfast, I sent him upstairs to get dressed while I cleaned up. By 7:15, he was back downstairs in his school clothes, jeans, a red t-shirt with a dinosaur on it, and the light jacket I'd reminded him to wear because the mornings were getting chilly now. "Don't forget Mr. Snuggles," I said as we headed toward the front door. "I won't," he said, tucking the bear under his arm. "He helps me with math." "Does he now?" "Yeah. When I don't know the answer, I ask him, and then while I'm waiting for him to answer, I figure it out myself." Smart kid. He got that from me, obviously. I grabbed my cardigan from the hook by the door and followed him outside. The bus stop was just at the end of our street, a 3-minute walk. The neighborhood was quiet this time of morning. A few other houses had their lights on, other early risers like me, but most windows were still dark. The autumn air was crisp and smelled like fallen leaves. and someone's wood-burning fireplace. Mrs. Henderson, from 2 doors down, was also walking her grandson to the bus stop. She waved when she saw us, and I waved back. Her grandson, Timothy, was in Aidan's class. The boys immediately ran ahead, already chattering about something I couldn't quite hear. "Beautiful morning," Mrs. Henderson said when I caught up to her. "It is," I agreed. "Fall is my favorite season." "Mine too, though I could do without the early darkness. I swear it feels like it's getting dark at 4 o'clock now." We made small talk while we waited, the kind of pleasant, meaningless conversation that neighbors have when they're friendly but not quite friends. She told me about her daughter's promotion at work. I told her about the new restaurant that had opened downtown. The boys played some kind of hopping game on the sidewalk. At 7:28, right on schedule, I saw the yellow school bus turn onto our street, the big, familiar vehicle with its flashing lights and bold black lettering. I felt that little flutter in my chest that I always felt when Aidan was about to go somewhere without me, that grandmother anxiety, that wish that I could wrap him in bubble wrap and keep him safe forever. The bus pulled up to the stop with a wheeze of brakes and a sigh of hydraulics. The door folded open with a mechanical clunk. The driver was wearing the standard uniform, a navy blue polo shirt, dark pants, sunglasses, even though it wasn't that bright out yet. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I remember thinking that was a little odd. Usually Mrs. Patterson drove this route, and she was a chatty, plump woman in her 50s who never wore sunglasses. But drivers switched routes sometimes. It happened. "Morning," the driver called out in a voice that sounded slightly muffled, maybe from allergies or a cold. "Morning," I called back. Timothy hopped on first, his grandmother giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. Then Aidan turned to me. "Bye, Grandma," he said, giving me a hug. I hugged him back, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, that kid's shampoo that smelled like watermelon. "Bye, sweetheart. Have a good day at school. Learn something amazing." "I will," he promised. He climbed up the bus steps, Mr. Snuggles still tucked under his arm. I watched him disappear into the dim interior of the bus. I couldn't see him take his seat because the windows were tinted, more than I remembered them being, but maybe that was the morning light playing tricks. The driver gave a wave. I waved back. Mrs. Henderson waved. The door folded, closed, and the bus drove away. I stood there for a moment, watching it disappear around the corner, feeling that familiar tug of anxiety mixed with pride. My grandson, going off to learn and grow and become whoever he was meant to be. Mrs. Henderson and I walked back toward our houses, still chatting. She split off at her driveway with a friendly goodbye, and I continued to mine. The morning was still beautiful. The sky was turning from grey to pale blue. Birds were starting to sing. I went inside, made myself a cup of tea, and settled into my favorite chair in the living room, the one by the window where the morning light came in just right. I had a book I was reading, a mystery novel about a retired detective who solves cold cases. I was enjoying it, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of the story. The clock on the mantel ticked away the minutes. 7:40, 7:50, 8 o'clock. At 8:17, my phone rang. I picked it up without looking at the caller ID, expecting it to be one of my friends from church, or maybe Marcus checking in about dinner plans for the weekend. "Hello? Mrs. Crawford?" A woman's voice, professional and slightly confused. "Yes, this is she. This is Principal Morrison from Riverside Elementary. I'm calling about Aidan." My stomach dropped immediately. That instinctive grandmother panic. "Is he okay? Is he hurt?" No, I don't know. That's why I'm calling." She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Mrs. Crawford, is Aidan sick today? Did you keep him home?" I frowned, my heart starting to beat faster. "No, I put him on the bus this morning. He should be in class by now." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, more careful, more concerned. "Mrs. Crawford, we took attendance at 8:15, and Aidan wasn't in his classroom. I checked with the bus depot, and they confirmed that bus 17 did its full route this morning. But when it arrived at school, there were no children on it. The driver reported that no one was at any of the stops. The world seemed to tilt sideways. "That's impossible," I said. my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I put him on the bus myself. I watched him get on. He was there with Mrs. Henderson's grandson, Timothy. Mrs. Crawford. The principal's voice was gentle now, the kind of gentle that people use when they're about to deliver bad news. I just spoke with Timothy Henderson. He's here at school. His grandmother drove him because… She stopped. Because why? I demanded. Because school is closed today for a teacher professional development conference. There are no buses running. Classes resume tomorrow. The room spun. That's impossible, I repeated, but my voice was weaker now. I saw the bus. Yellow school bus. Flashing lights. Driver in uniform. I waved to it. It drove away with my grandson on it. Mrs. Crawford, I need you to stay calm, Principal Morrison said, her voice taking on that careful, controlled tone that authority figures use in emergencies. I'm going to give you a phone number for the police, and I need you to… I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. I'd seen him get on the bus. I'd watched it drive away. This was real. This had happened. But if school was closed, if there were no buses running, then what had I put my grandson on? The panic was rising in my chest, like water filling a sinking ship. I grabbed my phone again with trembling fingers and pulled up my favorites. Marcus. I pressed his name. It rang 4 times before he answered. Mom, is everything okay? Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My voice was shaking, but I tried to keep it steady. Aiden is missing. What? Mom, what are you talking about? I put him on the school bus this morning, but the school just called and said he never arrived. They said school is closed today, that there are no buses running, but I saw him get on a bus. I saw it, Marcus. A yellow school bus picked him up. There was a pause on the other end. When Marcus spoke again, his tone had changed. Not to panic like I expected, not to fear, but to something worse. Annoyance. Mum, what do you mean you put him on a bus? You knew school was closed today. We talked about this on Sunday. That's why we arranged for you to keep him until tonight when we pick him up after our session. What? No, we didn't talk about that. Yes, we did, Mum. His voice was getting that edge to it, that tone he'd been using more and more lately. We sat at your kitchen table, and Jennifer specifically mentioned that school was closed Tuesday for professional development, and you said it was fine, that you'd enjoy an extra day with Aiden. I felt like I was drowning. Had we had that conversation? I tried to remember Sunday, tried to pull up the memory, but everything was fuzzy now, jumbled together with all the other Sundays, all the other kitchen table conversations. I don't remember that, I admitted, hating how small my voice sounded. Marcus sighed. It was a long, heavy sigh, the kind that said he was tired of dealing with this. Mom, where is Aiden right now? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I put him on what I thought was a school bus, and now the school is saying he's not there and there were no buses and I don't know where he is. Okay, Mom, I need you to calm down. He was using that voice now, that patronizing voice. Did you check his room? Did you check the backyard? Maybe he's just playing somewhere in the house. Marcus, I am not senile, I snapped. I know the difference between a child being in my house and a child being gone. He got on a bus. I saw him. Mum. Another sigh. I could hear him talking to someone in the background, his voice muffled like he'd covered the phone with his hand. Then he was back. Mum, Jennifer and I are going to come over, okay? Just stay there. Don't call anyone else. We'll be there in 20 minutes. We should call the police. Let's not panic yet. I'm sure there's a rational explanation. Just stay there and try to remember what actually happened this morning. Really think about it, okay? He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my living room, the phone clutched in my hand, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Was I losing my mind? Had I imagined the bus? But no, Mrs. Henderson had been there. She'd seen it too. She'd waved at it. Or had she? I tried to remember. Mrs. Henderson had been talking to me when the bus pulled up. Had she actually looked at it? Had she actually seen Aiden get on? Or had she been focused on Timothy? On saying goodbye to her own grandson? I grabbed my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found Mrs. Henderson's number. My fingers were still shaking as I pressed call. Margaret? She answered on the 3rd ring. Is everything all right? Dorothy, I need to ask you something. This morning, at the bus stop, you saw Aidan get on the bus, right? The bus. Honey, there was no bus this morning. School is closed, remember? I drove Timothy to his mother's house because she had the day off work and wanted to spend it with him. My blood turned to ice. But you were at the stop with me. We walked there together. No, dear. I waved to you from my driveway when I saw you walking Aidan to the corner, but I didn't go with you. I was loading Timothy into my car. But we talked. You told me about your daughter's promotion. A long pause. Margaret, that was last week, at the grocery store. Are you feeling all right? I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I remembered was wrong. Everything was jumbled and confused. And no. I stopped, took a breath, forced myself to think clearly. Something was wrong, yes. But something was wrong with the situation, not with me. I'd learned a long time ago to trust my gut. And my gut was screaming that I wasn't crazy. My gut was screaming that Aidan had gotten on a bus this morning, and that bus had taken him somewhere. I have to go, Dorothy, I said, and hung up before she could respond. I stood in my living room, forcing my mind to work through the panic. What did I know for certain? I knew that Aidan had been in my house this morning. I knew we'd eaten breakfast together. I knew he'd gotten dressed. I knew we'd walked to the bus stop. And I knew that a yellow bus had picked him up. Even if everyone else was telling me it hadn't happened, I knew what I'd seen. Then I remembered something that made my heart leap. The doorbell camera. Marcus had installed it for me 6 months ago, insisting it would make me safer, that I could see who was at the door before answering it. I hadn't used it much. Honestly, I found the whole thing a bit intrusive, but it was there, and it was always recording. I rushed to the front door, nearly tripping over the ottoman in my haste. The small camera was mounted just above the doorbell, its lens pointed at the front walkway and street. I pulled out my phone and opened the app that Marcus had set up for me, my fingers fumbling with the screen. The app showed a list of recorded events. I scrolled back to this morning. 7:15. Me and Aidan leaving the house. The video was short, just showing us walking out the door and down the front steps. I kept scrolling. 7:26. Motion detected. I pressed play. The video showed my front yard and the street beyond. I could see myself standing at the edge of my driveway, looking down the street. Then, the yellow bus appeared in the frame, pulling up to the stop. My heart was pounding as I watched. There it was. The bus. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I watched myself wave. I watched a small figure, Aidan, disappear from the edge of the frame, heading toward where the bus would be parked. The video quality wasn't perfect from this distance, but I could make out the basic scene. Then the bus drove away. I played it again and again, studying every detail, and that's when I saw it. I paused the video at the moment when the bus was most clearly visible in the frame. I zoomed in as much as the app would allow, the image pixelating but still visible enough to make out details. The bus was yellow. It had the general shape and size of a school bus. But as I zoomed in on the side of the vehicle, I could see that the lettering, what should have said Riverside School District in bold black letters, looked wrong. The letters seemed slightly off-center, slightly crooked. I zoomed in more. The image was grainy, but I could just barely make out what looked like edges around the lettering, like it wasn't painted on, like it was a magnetic sign, the kind you could stick to a vehicle and then remove. My blood ran cold. I moved the video forward frame by frame until I got a view of the back of the bus as it drove away. The license plate should have been clearly visible, but instead, I saw something else. The plate was covered, not with an official cover, but with what looked like dried mud, deliberately smeared to obscure the numbers and letters. This wasn't a school bus. Someone had made a vehicle look like a school bus. Someone had waited for the morning when school was closed, when real buses wouldn't be running. Someone had come to my stop and picked up my grandson. But why? And who? A cold realization was creeping up my spine. Someone had known that school was closed. Someone had known that I apparently hadn't remembered, or hadn't been told clearly enough. Someone had known that Aidan would be with me, that we'd walk to the bus stop like we did every Tuesday and Thursday. Someone had planned this. I was about to call 911, until I saw what was in the driver's hand on the video replay. I'd been so focused on the bus itself that I hadn't paid close attention to the driver. I scrolled back to the beginning of the clip and watched again, this time focusing on the figure behind the wheel. The driver was visible through the windshield, just barely, the sunglasses, the cap pulled low. But there was something else. When the driver waved, I could see, just for a moment, just one frame, what looked like a phone in the other hand. The driver was holding it up, not like making a call, but like recording, like documenting. Why would a fake bus driver need to record picking up a child unless the recording was meant to prove something, to show someone, to use as evidence? My mind was racing now, connecting dots that I didn't want to connect. Marcus's voice on the phone, the annoyance, the immediate assumption that I was confused, that I was having an episode, that we needed to talk about alternative living arrangements. The conversations over the past few months about my memory, the gentle suggestions that maybe I was forgetting things, the patient explanations when I'd insisted I remembered something differently than they did. What if none of that had been concern? What if it had been preparation? No, I was being paranoid. This was my son. He couldn't. But then I remembered something else. Something from 3 weeks ago that I'd dismissed at the time. I'd been at Marcus and Jennifer's house for Sunday dinner. After we'd eaten, I'd gone to use the bathroom and had overheard them talking in the kitchen. I'd only caught pieces of the conversation, but I remembered Jennifer saying something about getting it done before winter, and Marcus responding with, needs to look natural, and won't put up a fight if she thinks she's the one not remembering. At the time, I'd assumed they were talking about home renovations or holiday planning, but what if they'd been talking about something else? What if they'd been talking about me? I felt sick. This couldn't be real. Parents didn't hurt their own children just to what? Prove their mother was incompetent. That was insane. But then I thought about Marcus's business. I knew it hadn't been doing well. He'd mentioned some problems with investors, some issues with cash flow, and I knew that Jennifer had expensive tastes. The new car she'd gotten last month, the talk about private schools for Aiden, and I knew what was in my will. The house, worth close to $800,000 in the current market, the life insurance payout, another $500,000, the savings and investments, carefully managed over decades, totaling nearly $2 million altogether. If I were declared incompetent, if Marcus were given power of attorney, if I were placed in a nursing home, he'd control everything. But surely he wouldn't endanger Aiden just to make me look confused. Surely he wouldn't use his own son in some elaborate scheme to prove I was losing my mind. I wanted to believe my son wouldn't do that. But I'd learned over 73 years that people will do terrible things when money is involved. Things you'd never imagine. I was spiraling, I knew. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe wait. I stopped, my mind suddenly clearing as I remembered something else. Something that might prove I wasn't crazy, that might tell me exactly where Aiden was right now. Mr. Snuggles. 3 months ago, after a news story about a missing child, I'd done something that Marcus had laughed at. I'd bought a small tracking device, like an AirTag, but a different brand, and I'd sewn it into Mr. Snuggles's back, hidden in the stuffing behind the patch I'd made when I'd repaired the tear in the bear's foot. I'd told Marcus about it at the time. He'd rolled his eyes and said I was being overprotective, that I'd been watching too many crime documentaries, but he hadn't made me remove it, so I'd left it there, feeling both foolish and comforted by the small device hidden in my grandson's favourite toy. Aiden took Mr. Snuggles everywhere, including on the bus this morning. With shaking hands, I pulled up the tracking app on my phone. I'd set it up back when I'd installed the device, but I'd barely looked at it since. It took me a moment to remember my password, and another moment to navigate the interface. Then the map loaded. A small blue dot appeared on the screen, blinking steadily. The location indicator showed a spot about 5 miles from my house, in an area I didn't immediately recognize. I zoomed in on the map. It looked like industrial buildings? Old warehouses, maybe? The location hadn't moved for the past hour, according to the tracking history. Aiden was there, or at least Mr. Snuggles was. And if Mr. Snuggles was there, then Aiden was there. I had a choice to make. I could wait for Marcus to arrive. I could try to convince him and the police that I wasn't crazy, that I really had put Aiden on a bus, that the bus had been fake, that our grandson was in danger. I could show them the doorbell camera footage and hope they saw what I saw, instead of dismissing it as a confused old woman's paranoid misinterpretation. Or I could go get my grandson myself. The smart thing, the sensible thing, would be to wait, to call the police, to let professionals handle this. But something in my gut, that same instinct that had kept me alive and sharp for 7 decades, was telling me that time was critical, that if I waited, if I tried to convince people who already thought I was losing my marbles, it might be too late. And if I was wrong about Marcus, if this was all some terrible misunderstanding or some random kidnapping by a stranger, then the last thing I wanted was to waste time arguing with my son about whether I was competent while my grandson was in danger. I made my decision. I went to the coat closet and pulled out Gerald's old jacket, the heavy canvas one he'd worn when he'd worked on his projects in the garage. It still smelled faintly like him, like motor oil and Old Spice. I put it on, feeling the weight of it, feeling like I was putting on armor. Then I went to the garage. Gerald had been a practical man. He'd kept tools organized, supplies stocked, everything in its place. I knew exactly where to find what I needed. I grabbed a tire iron from the tool rack. It was heavy, solid steel, with good weight to it. I also grabbed a flashlight, a big, heavy mag light that could double as a weapon if needed, and my phone, making sure it was fully charged. I hesitated for just a moment, thinking about calling someone. But who? The police would think I was crazy. Marcus would try to stop me. Dorothy Henderson had already made it clear she thought I was confused. No, I was on my own. I got into my car, a sensible silver Honda Civic that I'd bought 3 years ago when my old Buick finally gave up the ghost. I started the engine, pulled up the tracking app again, and set it to navigation mode. 5 miles, maybe 10 minutes of driving. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Mrs. Henderson in her yard, watering her roses. She looked up and waved. I waved back automatically, wondering what she'd think if she knew what I was really doing. Probably that I'd finally lost it completely. Maybe I had, but I was going to find my grandson. The drive took me through familiar streets at first, the neighborhood I'd lived in for 40 years, past the park where I used to take Marcus when he was little, past the library where Aiden and I went for story time sometimes. Then the streets became less familiar as I headed toward the industrial part of town, an area I rarely had reason to visit. The buildings here were older, more run down, warehouses with broken windows, abandoned lots filled with weeds and trash, a few businesses that looked barely operational. This wasn't the kind of place you'd bring a child unless you were trying to hide them. My phone's GPS guided me closer to the blue dot, 3 miles away, 2 miles, 1 mile. And then the blue dot was right in front of me. I pulled over half a block away, not wanting to announce my arrival. The building the tracker indicated was a large 2-story warehouse with faded red brick walls and windows covered with plywood. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, but the gate was hanging open, rusted and broken. A few scraggly trees grew along the fence line, their leaves brown and falling, and parked in the lot beside the warehouse was a yellow vehicle. From this distance I couldn't see details, but the shape was right. The size was right. The fake school bus. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every instinct was screaming at me to call the police now, to wait for backup, to not go in there alone. But that same gut instinct that had gotten me this far was also telling me that if I waited, something terrible might happen, that whoever was in there might hurt Aiden if they thought they were about to be caught, or might move him, or might... I couldn't finish that thought. I parked my car behind an abandoned building where it wouldn't be immediately visible. I grabbed the tire iron and the flashlight. My phone was in my jacket pocket, set to silent, but still tracking Aiden's location. I got out of the car and started walking toward the warehouse. The late morning sun was bright overhead, but the shadows around the building seemed darker somehow, more menacing. My footsteps crunched on the gravel, and broken glass scattered across the pavement. I tried to walk quietly, but everything seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. I reached the fence and slipped through the broken gate. Up close, the yellow vehicle was definitely meant to look like a school bus, but the illusion was less convincing now. The paint job was good, but not perfect. The windows were tinted too dark, and I could see now what I'd suspected from the doorbell camera. The Riverside School District lettering was indeed magnetic signs, stuck to the sides of what was probably just a regular commercial van that had been painted yellow. I moved past the fake bus, keeping low, and approached the warehouse. There was a small door on the side of the building, separate from the large loading bay doors at the front. I tried the handle as quietly as I could. It was unlocked. The door opened with a soft creak that sounded like a scream in the silence. I froze, listening for any sound that might indicate I'd been heard. Nothing. Just the distant sound of traffic from the main road and the rustle of wind through the dying trees. I slipped inside. The interior of the warehouse was dim, lit only by the sunlight filtering through the cracks in the boarded windows. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of light. The air smelled like mildew and old concrete and something else, something chemical that I couldn't identify. I could hear voices. They were coming from somewhere deeper in the building, echoing off the bare walls. I couldn't make out words yet, but I could hear the low rumble of someone talking, maybe on the phone. I moved forward carefully, the tire iron gripped tightly in my right hand, the flashlight in my left. The warehouse was mostly empty, just a few old pallets and some abandoned machinery pushed against the walls. My shoes made soft, scuffing sounds on the concrete floor, no matter how carefully I stepped. The voices were getting clearer. I moved toward them, staying close to the wall, using the shadows and old equipment as cover. "Has to look authentic," a man's voice was saying. "That's the whole point. We need her to look completely panicked, completely out of her mind with confusion." The video of her putting him on what she thinks is a bus, combined with the school's confirmation that there were no buses, combined with her calling me in a panic saying she lost him, it's perfect. The judge will have no choice but to grant the conservatorship. My blood turned to ice. I knew that voice. Marcus, my son. I edged closer, my heart breaking and hardening at the same time. I reached a stack of old crates and peered around them. There, in a cleared area in the center of the warehouse, lit by a battery-powered lantern, was my grandson. Aidan was sitting on the floor with Mr. Snuggles, playing with some toy cars that someone had apparently given him. He looked unharmed, maybe even content, like he was just playing in any normal place. And standing a few feet away with his back to me was Marcus. He was still wearing the navy blue polo shirt. The sunglasses and cap were sitting on a nearby crate. Next to them was a realistic-looking wig and what appeared to be a false moustache, probably the disguise he'd worn as the bus driver. He was on the phone. "Yeah, I know it seems extreme," he was saying. "But think about the money, Jennifer. 2.5 million, give or take, plus the house. We can pay off the business debts, get Aidan into that private school, buy the lake house you wanted. We just need to get through the next few weeks. We let her panic, let her seem more and more confused, get the conservatorship, and then we can slowly start making it clear that she needs full-time care. Once she's in a facility, we control everything." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "She won't suspect us," he continued. "That's the beauty of it. From her perspective, she put Aidan on a bus and then got confused about whether school was in session. She'll think she's losing her mind. She probably already does. And everyone else will think so too. Dorothy Henderson already told me that Mum called her sounding completely disoriented. Principal Morrison is concerned. It's all falling into place." Another pause. "Aidan's fine. I told him we're playing a game, that we're surprising Grandma later. He thinks it's fun. In an hour or so, I'll find him wandering near the park a few blocks from Mum's house. I'll call it in. Say a concerned citizen spotted him. Everyone will think he wandered off while Mum was confused. She'll be so relieved to have him back that she won't even question the details. And we'll have another piece of evidence that she can't be trusted to care for a child." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Yeah, the fake bus was Jennifer's idea. Pretty clever, right? Mum's always been so paranoid about safety, always insisting on watching him get on the bus. We figured if we gave her a bus to put him on, she'd feel secure about it. And then when it turned out there weren't supposed to be any buses, It would make her look even more confused, like she'd completely fabricated the memory. My hands were shaking, not from fear now, from rage. This was my son, my child, the baby I'd brought into this world, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed for and loved unconditionally. And he was using his own child, my beloved grandson, as a pawn in a scheme to steal my life, my autonomy, my dignity, all for money. I thought about all the times over the past few months when I'd questioned myself, when I'd wondered if maybe they were right, maybe I was forgetting things, maybe I was getting confused. Every single time, it had been him, gaslighting me, manipulating me, setting me up. The visits where he'd casually mentioned something we'd supposedly discussed, making me doubt my memory. The concerned questions about whether I'd taken my vitamins, implying I was forgetting basic self-care. The gentle suggestions that maybe I should write things down more often, that maybe I should see a doctor about my memory. All of it had been building to this. I stepped out from behind the crates. "You know what I think, Marcus?" I said, my voice cutting through the warehouse like a blade. "I think you forgot something important in your clever little plan." Marcus spun around, his phone falling from his hand and clattering on the concrete. His face went white. "Mum, how did you—" "I'll tell you what you forgot," I continued, walking toward him with the tire iron still in my hand. Not threatening, just present. "You forgot that before you were born, I was already outsmarting people. You forgot that I navigated a man's world in the 1970s and 80s, that I ran my own business, that I raised you as a single mother after your father died. You forgot that wisdom doesn't evaporate just because someone turns 70. Aidan had looked up from his toys, his face brightening when he saw me. "Grandma, are you here for the surprise game too?" "Sort of, sweetie," I said, not taking my eyes off Marcus. "Why don't you stay right there for just a minute while Daddy and I talk?" Marcus was backing up now, his hands raised like I was the dangerous one. "Mum, listen, this isn't what it looks like. Isn't it?" I pulled my phone out with my free hand. "Should we call Jennifer and ask her? I heard your whole conversation, Marcus. Every word. How you're planning to have me declared incompetent. How you're going to put me in a facility and steal my money. How you used your own son, your own child, as bait in your disgusting scheme. You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Marcus's voice was rising now, panicky. "The business is failing. We're drowning in debt. You're sitting on millions while you're what? Living in a 4-bedroom house? Driving new cars? Taking vacations?" I shook my head. "I've offered to help you financially. I've offered to loan you money for the business. You always said no, said you had it handled. Because you didn't want a loan, did you? You wanted it all." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "What are you going to do?" That was when I smiled. "You know what's funny about technology, Marcus? You installed that doorbell camera for me. You set up the tracking app on my phone when I put the AirTag in Mr. Snuggles. You gave me all the tools I needed to prove you wrong." I held up my phone, turning it so he could see the screen. On it was a video call, very clearly recording, and on the other end of that call, their faces shocked and horrified, were 2 police officers from the local station. I'd called 911 before I even got out of my car. I'd set up the video call and put the phone in my shirt pocket with the camera pointing out. They'd seen everything. They'd heard everything. "Hello, officers," I said pleasantly to the phone. "I believe you heard my son confess to kidnapping, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. We're at the old Riverside Industrial Warehouse on 5th Street. The child is safe. I'll keep them both here until you arrive." The color drained completely from Marcus's face. "Mum, please, Grandma, why is Daddy crying?" Aidan asked, confused. "Sometimes grown-ups cry when they realize they've made very bad choices, sweetheart," I said. I heard sirens in the distance getting closer. Marcus slumped against the wall, all the fight going out of him. "How did you know?" he whispered. "How did you figure it out?" "Because unlike what you've been trying to make me believe, I'm not senile. I remember everything. I see everything. I trust my instincts. And my instincts have been telling me for months that something was wrong." I walked over to Aidan and offered him my hand. "Come on, honey. Let's wait outside for the police officers." "Are we still surprising, Daddy?" he asked, taking my hand. I think Daddy's had enough surprises for one day, I said. As we walked toward the door, I looked back at my son one last time. He looked smaller somehow, pathetic. The man who'd tried to take everything from me now had nothing at all. You know what the saddest part is, Marcus, I said softly. If you'd just asked me, if you'd just been honest about needing help, I would have given you anything. But instead, you taught your mother one of the most painful lessons of her life, that the people who claim to love you can sometimes be the ones who'll hurt you the most. The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights flashed through the cracks in the boarded windows. I led Aidan out into the sunshine, away from his father, away from the darkness of that warehouse, and the darkness of what had almost happened. The police cars pulled up, officers jumping out. I recognized one of them from the video call, Sergeant Rodriguez, a kind woman in her 40s, who'd always been friendly when she'd given presentations at the senior center. "Mrs. Crawford?" she called out. "Are you and the child all right?" "We're fine, Sergeant," I said. "My son is inside. He'll need to be arrested for kidnapping, conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud, and anything else you can think of. I have video evidence of his confession, and I believe you heard most of it over our call." "We did indeed," she said, nodding to the other officers who headed into the warehouse. "That was some very quick thinking, setting up that video call." "I've learned to document everything," I said. "When people are trying to make you think you're crazy, evidence becomes very important." They found Marcus inside, sitting on the floor, not even trying to run. As they led him out in handcuffs, he looked at me once, and I saw something in his eyes. Not defiance, not anger, but a sad kind of recognition. He knew he'd underestimated me. He knew he'd lost. An ambulance arrived to check Aidan over, but he was fine. Physically, at least. The emotional impact of realizing his father had used him in a criminal scheme would probably take years of therapy to process. But kids are resilient. He'd get through it. Jennifer arrived about 20 minutes later, screeching up in her BMW. She ran toward the police line, screaming about her husband, demanding to know what was happening. When she saw me standing there with Aidan, when Sergeant Rodriguez calmly informed her that she was also under investigation as an accomplice, I watched her face cycle through shock, anger, and then calculation. She tried to cry, tried to claim she'd had no idea what Marcus was planning, but I pulled out my phone again and played a recording I'd made earlier, the voicemail she'd left for Marcus 3 weeks ago, the one he'd foolishly saved, the one I'd found when I'd checked his iCloud account using the family sharing settings he'd never bothered to remove me from. In the voicemail, Jennifer's voice was clear as day. "We need to move faster on the conservatorship thing. I saw a lake house today that's perfect, but we need access to her accounts by spring at the latest. Make the bus thing happen soon. The longer we wait, the more chance she figures something out." Jennifer's tears dried up real quick after that. They arrested her too. By the end of the day, I was sitting in my living room with Aidan curled up next to me on the couch, watching cartoons like nothing had happened. The detective assigned to the case had taken my full statement. The social workers had determined that Aidan could stay with me pending the investigation. Marcus and Jennifer were in jail, their bail set high enough that they wouldn't be getting out anytime soon. I should have felt victorious, vindicated, relieved. Instead, I just felt tired and sad. So incredibly sad. My phone buzzed. A text from Dorothy Henderson. "Margaret, I saw the news. I am so sorry. I should have listened to you this morning. Can I bring you anything? Dinner? Company?" I texted back, "Thank you, but we're okay. Maybe coffee tomorrow." "Absolutely. And Margaret, you're the strongest woman I know." I set down my phone and pulled Aidan closer. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes, still innocent despite everything that had happened. "Grandma, are Mum and Dad coming home soon? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his parents are criminals, that they'd used him as a tool to commit elder abuse, that their love of money had destroyed a family?" "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly, "but you're safe here with me. You'll always be safe with me." "I like staying with you," he said. "You make the best pancakes." I laughed despite everything. "I do, don't I?" As the evening wore on and Aidan fell asleep against my shoulder, I thought about everything that had happened. about how close Marcus and Jennifer had come to succeeding, about how they'd preyed on society's assumptions about elderly people, about their tendency to dismiss us as confused or incompetent. They'd forgotten that being old doesn't mean being stupid. It means having 7 decades of experience reading people, recognizing patterns, trusting your instincts. They'd forgotten that the mind that had raised Marcus, that had run a successful business, that had navigated countless challenges, was still sharp as ever. They'd forgotten that you don't survive 73 years without learning a thing or two about survival. Most of all, they'd forgotten that a grandmother protecting her grandchild is the most dangerous force in nature. The next few weeks were chaos. The news media picked up the story. Local businessman arrested for elaborate plot to steal elderly mother's fortune. And suddenly, I was getting interview requests from everyone. I declined most of them. This wasn't about fame. This was about family, about betrayal, about justice. The legal proceedings moved forward. The evidence against Marcus and Jennifer was overwhelming. My video recording, the doorbell camera footage, the fake bus they'd created, the messages and emails I'd managed to access through their cloud accounts, the testimony from Principal Morrison about the phone call, Dorothy Henderson's statement about seeing me alone at the bus stop, contradicting their claim that I'd been confused. Their lawyer tried to argue that I'd misunderstood their intentions, that it had been a misguided attempt to prove I needed help, not a malicious scheme. But the recording of Marcus explaining how they'd manipulate me and steal my money kind of blew that defense out of the water. They both pled guilty eventually. Marcus got 5 years for kidnapping and fraud. Jennifer got 3 as an accomplice. They'd be out eventually, but their lives were ruined. Marcus's business declared bankruptcy. Jennifer lost her precious BMW, her designer clothes, everything. And I gained full custody of Aiden. It wasn't what I'd expected at this stage of my life. I'd imagined my 70s as a time of quiet, of gardening and book clubs and maybe some travel. Instead, I was raising a second child, packing lunches and helping with homework and attending parent-teacher conferences. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Aiden thrived. After some initial confusion and sadness about his parents, he settled into life with me. We developed routines. Pancakes on Tuesdays and Saturdays, story time before bed, walks to the park after school. And yes, I still walked him to the bus stop every morning, to the real bus stop, where Mrs. Henderson and I now waited together, both of us watching carefully until the real bus, license plate clearly visible, proper district insignia painted on, driven by the chatty Mrs. Patterson, had disappeared around the corner. I never took safety for granted again. But I also never doubted myself again. 6 months after Marcus's arrest, I was at home one evening, helping Aiden with his math homework, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Crawford?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes." "My name is Patricia Chen. I'm a reporter for the senior advocacy newsletter Golden Years, Sharp Minds. I'd love to interview you about your experience. We're running a series on elder abuse and how to recognize gaslighting. Your story, well, it could help a lot of people." I hesitated. I'd avoided publicity so far, but maybe that had been wrong. Maybe my experience could help other elderly people recognize the warning signs. Maybe I could prevent what almost happened to me from happening to someone else. "All right," I said. "I'll do it." The interview ran the next month. Patricia wrote a beautiful article, not sensationalizing what happened, but focusing on the gaslighting techniques Marcus had used, the red flags I'd noticed, and the importance of trusting yourself, even when everyone around you is saying you're wrong. The response was overwhelming. I got letters from all over the country, other elderly people sharing their own stories of family members trying to manipulate them, steal from them, convince them they were losing their minds. Many said my story had given them the courage to speak up, to push back, to trust their own judgment. One letter in particular stuck with me. It was from a woman in Oregon named Ruth, 82 years old. She wrote, "Dear Margaret, I've been reading your story over and over. For 2 years, my daughter has been telling me I'm forgetting things, that I'm getting confused, that maybe I should let her help manage my finances. I believed her because she's my daughter and I love her. But after reading your story, I decided to check my bank accounts myself. Money has been disappearing, small amounts at first, but more recently, larger sums. I've confronted her, and I've contacted the authorities. I don't know what will happen, but I know that if I hadn't read your story, I would have kept doubting myself until there was nothing left to steal. You saved me. Thank you. I cried when I read that letter, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of something terrible. That's the thing about living for 7 decades. You learn that nothing is entirely black or white, that pain and purpose can coexist, that the worst experiences can teach the most important lessons. I learned to be even more vigilant, even more protective of Aidan, but I also learned to let him grow, to give him independence appropriate for his age. The trauma of what his parents had done couldn't be erased, but it could be worked through with therapy, with love, with time. I learned that trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, but I also learned that not everyone is untrustworthy. Dorothy Henderson became a real friend, someone I could count on. Sergeant Rodriguez checked in on us regularly, becoming almost like family. Aidan's teacher, Mrs. Yamamoto, went out of her way to make sure he felt supported at school. Good people existed. I just had to be smart about recognizing them. And I learned that age is not a weakness. It's a superpower. The years I'd lived, the experiences I'd accumulated, the wisdom I'd gained. That was what had saved Aidan and saved myself. Not in spite of being 73, but because of it. Now, 2 years after that terrible Tuesday morning, life has found a new normal. Aidan is 9, thriving in school, playing Little League, making friends. He sees a therapist twice a month to work through everything that happened. He's allowed to write to his parents if he wants to. They send him letters from prison, full of apologies and regret. But he rarely responds. Maybe someday he'll be ready to forgive them. Maybe not. That's his choice to make. As for me, I'm still in my house. Still making pancakes on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Still walking Aidan to the real bus stop every morning. Still sharp. Still vigilant. Still trusting my instincts. And I've become something of an advocate. I speak at senior centers now, teaching other elderly people how to recognize the signs of financial abuse and gaslighting. I've worked with lawmakers to strengthen protections for seniors. I've helped other families navigate similar situations. Marcus and Jennifer get out in a few years. I don't know what will happen then, whether they'll want a relationship with Aidan, whether they'll apologize to me, whether they've actually learned anything, or if they'll just be bitter about being caught. I can't control that. I can only control how I respond. And I've decided that the best response is to live well, to raise Aidan with love and wisdom, to use my experience to help others, to never, ever doubt myself again. Because here's what I know now, what I want every person reading this to understand. Your instincts matter. Your memory matters. Your perception of reality matters. If someone is trying to convince you that you're crazy, that you're confused, that you can't trust your own mind, pay attention. Document everything. Trust yourself. They thought they could trick an old woman. They forgot that this old woman had been outsmarting people since before they were born. They forgot that wisdom beats youth every single time. They forgot that you don't mess with a grandmother protecting her grandchild. And that was their biggest mistake. So share this if you believe wisdom beats youth every single time. And tell me in the comments, do you check who picks up your kids? Do you trust your instincts even when others doubt you? Let me know. Because in a world that tries to silence the elderly, that tries to convince us we're past our prime, that tries to steal our power, we need to stand together. We need to trust ourselves. And we need to remember that being old doesn't mean being weak. It means being strong enough to survive everything life has thrown at us. And that kind of strength? That's unbeatable. Have you ever been told you're crazy, even when you know you're right? Have you ever trusted your gut over everyone else's doubt? Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Let's expose the truth together. Because the truth is this: age is power, experience is wisdom, and nobody gets to take that away from us. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, always trust your gut.